The letter arrived on a Tuesday in April, the kind of spring day in Ohio that pretends to be warm until the wind hits you and you remember that winter here doesn't end so much as exhaust itself into submission. I was working the lunch shift at the diner on Route 23, the one with the orange vinyl booths, and the pie case that hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration, and my mother called to tell me that Lark had picked up the mail. She says there's news. My mother said. Her voice was bright, performative, the tone she used for Lark's victories and my expected disappointments. She says you should come home after work. Both of you, together, I knew. Before I hung up the phone, before I wiped the coffee rings from the counter, before I counted out my tips and found that I had made $47 for 6 hours of smiling at truck drivers who called me sweetheart and left phone numbers on napkins. I knew which letter had come. I knew what it would say. I had been waiting for it since I was 8 years old, since my father read me the first page of The Secret History, and I looked up at him and said, I want to go there. I want to be where words matter that much. Yale, early decision. The only school I had applied to, because I couldn't afford application fees for more than one, because I had spent my summer washing dishes and mowing lawns to pay for the chance, because I had written my essay 17 times and memorized it and whispered it to myself in the dark like a prayer. I drove home. The house was small, the kind of house that people in our town called cozy when they meant could use a new roof. My mother was in the kitchen, making coffee she wouldn't drink, arranging cookies on a plate that had been a wedding gift from someone who was no longer married to anyone in our family. Lark was on the couch, her legs tucked under her, her face arranged in an expression I had seen before, the one she wore when she was about to deliver bad news that she had already metabolized into something that served her. Ren, she said. Sit down. I didn't sit. I stood in the doorway, my diner uniform still smelling of grease and disappointment, and I looked at the coffee table where 2 envelopes lay, one thick, cream-colored, the weight of admission, one thin, the weight of rejection. Lark picked up the thin one. She held it out to me. Her eyes were wet, she could cry on command, had been able to since we were 5, when she learned that tears got her out of trouble and into the front seat of the car and the last piece of cake. I'm so sorry, she said. I know how much you wanted this. I took the envelope. It was addressed to me, Ren Ashford, my name in the neat type of an admissions office that had considered me and found me wanting. I opened it. The letter was brief, polite, final. We regret to inform you. The words every applicant fears, the words I had rehearsed nightmares about, the words that now sat in my hand with the weight of a future closing. I didn't cry, not then. I looked at the thick envelope on the table, the one addressed to Lark, and I felt something I couldn't name. Not jealousy, we were twins, but we had never been competitors. Not relief, I had wanted this too much for relief. Just a hollow space where hope had been, a silence where the next 12 years of my life had been planned. Congratulations, I said to Lark. My voice sounded like it came from someone else, someone smaller, someone who had learned not to want things too loudly. Lark hugged me. She smelled like my shampoo, she always used my shampoo, my clothes, my books, my life, and she whispered, I'm so sorry, Ren. I know this was your dream, but maybe it's for the best. You're so anxious, so quiet. Yale would have eaten you alive. You'll be happier at State, closer to home. Safer. I let her hold me. I let her rock me like she was the one who was grieving. And I didn't know, not yet, not for 8 more years, that the thick envelope on the table was mine. That the thin one in my hand was hers. That my twin sister, my identical other, the person who shared my face and my birthday and the womb where we had grown together, had looked at the mail, seen the truth, and decided that my future was simply another thing of mine that she could use. My name is Ren. I'm 30 years old. I'm an adjunct professor of literature at a community college in Ohio, which means I teach 5 sections of freshman composition for less money than I made at the diner, and I grade papers in my car because the office I share with 3 other adjuncts smells like mildew and broken dreams. I have published 1 essay, synonymous, viral, devastating, and I have a cat named Donne who doesn't care about metaphysical poetry but responds to the sound of a can opener. I also have a book. It's coming out next spring. The title is The Stolen History, Twins, Identity, and Academic Fraud in American Literature. The author photo is me, really me, not her, not the face she wore while she lived my life, and the dedication reads, For Lark, who taught me that identity is not what you're given, but what you take back. This is not a story about sisterly rivalry. This is a story about what happens when the person who looks exactly like you decides that your face is just another feature she can borrow. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Ren, and this channel is where we tell the truth about the families who call it sharing when it's theft, who call it protection when it's erasure. If this is your first time listening, hit that subscribe button. We post stories every week, real stories, hard stories, stories about women who stopped being the quiet twin. Here's my story. Lark and I were identical. Genetically, visually, chromosomally, the same DNA, the same face, the same brown eyes and dark hair and the small scar above our left eyebrows from the chicken pox we got at 4. But we were never the same person. Not to anyone who looked closely. Lark was loud. She was bright, magnetic, the kind of person who entered rooms like they were stages, and she was the principal performer. She was funny, cruel, generous in flashes that made her cruelty forgivable. She was our mother's favorite. Lark needs more support. Our mother would say, Lark feels things so deeply, Lark is so sensitive. She was our father's favorite too, though he would have denied it, would have pointed to the times he read me The Secret History or discussed Donne's holy sonnets while Lark watched reality television in the next room. But favorites are not always about attention. Sometimes they are about relief, the relief of a parent who doesn't have to worry, who knows that one child will demand and the other will simply survive. I was the survivor. Quiet, anxious, bookish in a way that made people uncomfortable at parties. I read in corners. I wrote in journals that I hid under my mattress. I worked babysitting, lawn mowing diner shifts, while Lark spent summers finding herself at beach houses owned by friends she had collected like charms on a bracelet. I saved every dollar. I applied to one college. I wrote my essay 17 times. Lark applied to Yale because I did. That was the reason she gave. We're twins, Ren. We should stick together. Wouldn't it be amazing if we both got in? She didn't pay the application fee. I paid it, using the money I had saved from the diner, because Lark's finding herself summers had left her without savings, and our parents had long since decided that Lark's needs were expenses while mine were investments in self-sufficiency. I wrote her essay too. She asked me to, 3 days before the deadline, her eyes wide with the particular panic she could summon when she needed something. I don't have time, she said, and you write so much better than me. Please, Ren, just this once for your twin, I wrote it. I stayed up until 3 a.m., crafting a narrative about Lark's passion for literature, her dedication to learning, her unique perspective on the world, all things that were true of me and partially true of her, at least when she was performing them for an audience. I made her sound like the person I wished I was, confident, driven, destined for greatness. I made her sound like me but louder. She submitted it without reading it. She didn't need to. She trusted me, or she trusted that I would do the work, which was not the same thing but functioned identically. We waited. April arrived. The letter came. And Lark opened the mail, as she always did, because she was the first, because she was the favorite, because the world had taught her that things addressed to the Ashford twins were simply things she should inspect before distributing. I don't know what she felt when she saw the 2 envelopes. I don't know if there was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of conscience, a split second where she considered telling the truth. I only know what she did. She opened the thick envelope, saw my name on the acceptance letter, and decided that it was a mistake, or not a mistake, a gift. A gift that I wouldn't appreciate, wouldn't use, wouldn't deserve the way she would. She gave me the thin envelope. She gave me rejection. She gave me the narrative that would define the next 8 years of my life. Ren, the smart twin who wasn't quite smart enough. Ren, the anxious twin who couldn't handle pressure. Ren, the quiet twin who was better off staying close to home, working at the diner, being safe. And she took my name to Yale. I didn't suspect. Not for 8 years. Why would I? The envelope was addressed to me. The letter was in my hand. The rejection was real. The disappointment was real. The life that followed was real. I went to state. I majored in English. I worked at the library, shelving books I should have been discussing in seminars, reading Donne in the stacks during my breaks because there was no professor to teach him to me. I graduated. I got a job at the community college. I taught freshman composition to students who didn't want to write and didn't understand why they had to. I was fine. I was safe. I was exactly where Lark had said I would be happier. Lark, meanwhile, was living my life. She went to Yale as Ren Ashford. She used my social security number, my acceptance letter, my essay. She took my name because it was easier than explaining why Lark was suddenly Ren, because our faces were identical, because the university had no reason to question a student who looked exactly like her ID photo. She lived in the dorm I had dreamed of. She took the classes I had planned. She studied with the professors I had read about in admissions brochures. She had the boyfriend, a poet named Julian who wrote sonnets about her eyes, my eyes, the eyes that he thought belonged to a woman named Wren who loved Donne and the secret history and the idea of a life where words mattered. She had the internship at the literary magazine, the semester in Rome, the thesis on Donne's metaphysical conceits, my thesis, the one I had outlined in my journal at 16, the one she found and submitted as her own. She graduated with honors. She got the job in New York, literary marketing consultant, a title that meant she went to parties with people who had written books and convinced them that she could make those books successful. She built a life that was supposed to be mine, brick by stolen brick, and she wore my face while she did it. I visited her once, in New York. She had an apartment in Brooklyn, small but expensive, with bookshelves full of books I had read and she had not. She made me tea. She talked about her job, her friends, her stressful but rewarding life. She didn't mention Yale. She didn't mention the name she had used. She didn't mention that every time she introduced herself as Wren, she was performing a theft that had become so natural she no longer felt the weight of it. You should move to New York, she said. Get out of Ohio, be someone. I am someone, I said, but I didn't believe it, not then. I believed that Lark was the someone and I was the shadow, the echo, the twin who had been rejected while her identical other had been accepted, as if the universe could only handle one of us at a time and had chosen the louder one. I left. I didn't visit again. We talked on the phone, holidays, birthdays, the occasional check-in that felt more like obligation than connection. I told myself we had grown apart, that twins sometimes did, that the distance between us was natural rather than constructed. I told myself a lot of things. And then, at 26, I applied to graduate school. The program was an MFA in creative writing, low residency, affordable enough that I could afford it on my adjunct salary. I had been writing, secretly, obsessively, the way I had read in the library stacks, essays about literature, about identity, about the way books create people as much as people create books. I had an essay I was proud of, about twinship in Shakespeare and the anxiety of identical selves. I thought the MFA would give me time to write more, to find a voice, to become something other than the person who taught freshman composition in a mildewed office. The application required transcripts from all previous institutions. I sent my state transcripts, and then I received an email from the admissions office. We note a discrepancy in your academic record. Our system shows a Wren Ashford who graduated from Yale University in 2018. Could you please clarify? I stared at the screen. I read the email 3 times. 4. I felt the same hollowness I had felt at 18, the same silence where a future should be. But this time, the silence was different. This time, it was filled with something I couldn't yet name. I called Yale. I identified myself, Wren Ashford, social security number, date of birth. I asked for my records. The registrar was helpful, professional, the kind of person who deals with confused alumni every day. Yes, Miss Ashford, she said, I have your file. Graduated 2018. English major, honors, thesis, the metaphysics of metaphor, Donne's conceits and the construction of self. Would you like a transcript sent? I couldn't speak. The words were there, in my mouth, but they wouldn't come out. Donne, metaphysical conceits, construction of self, my thesis, my words, my name attached to a life I had never lived. Miss Ashford, the registrar prompted. Are you there? I'm not Wren Ashford, I finally said. My voice sounded like it came from the bottom of a well, from the place where I had buried my 8-year-old self, the one who had wanted to go where words mattered. I mean, I am Wren Ashford. But I didn't go to Yale. I went to state. I was rejected. I have the letter. I stopped. I understood. Or I began to understand, the way you understand a plot twist in a novel you thought you knew, the way the pieces rearrange themselves and the picture becomes something else entirely. Could you send me a photo? I asked. From the file. The graduation photo, please. The registrar hesitated. Privacy policies. FERPA. The rules that protect students from people exactly like me, people who claim to be someone they're not, who steal identities, who take what doesn't belong to them. I'm the person in the photo, I said. I just need to confirm something, please. She sent it. An email 2 minutes later with an attachment. I opened it. It was Lark. Smiling in a graduation gown, holding a diploma, standing in front of a building I had only seen in brochures. My face, my name, my life. I sat in my car, the same car I had driven home from the diner at 18, the same car I still drove because I couldn't afford a new one, and I looked at the photo for an hour. I looked at my own eyes, my own smile, my own face on a body that had lived in a dorm I had never entered, taken classes I had never attended, loved a poet I had never met. I looked at the theft of my life, rendered in pixels and academic regalia, and I felt something I had never felt before. Not grief, not betrayal, not even anger, though anger would come later. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize that every story you have told yourself about your own inadequacy was written by someone else. That the rejection you carried like a scar was not yours. That the life you accepted as safe and fine was not the life you were meant to have, but the life that was left over after someone took what they wanted. I started the car. I drove to my mother's house. I didn't call ahead. I walked in, the door was never locked, another feature of the cozy house, and I found my mother in the kitchen, making coffee she wouldn't drink, arranging cookies on the same wedding gift plate. "Mom," I said, "I need to ask you something, about Lark, about Yale." She turned. She looked at me, really looked, the way she rarely did, because looking at me meant seeing the twin who didn't demand, who didn't perform, who simply existed in the background of Lark's brighter narrative. And I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Not surprise. Recognition. The look of a woman who has known something for a long time and has chosen not to know it. "Ren," she said, don't what? Don't ask, don't know. Don't finally, after 8 years, understand why my twin sister has a life that looks exactly like the one I wanted, and I have a life that looks exactly like the one she said I deserved. My mother sat down. Hard. The chair creaked. She didn't look at me. She looked at the cookies, at the plate, at the pattern of flowers that had faded over 20 years of use. She told me, my mother whispered. After, when it was too late, when she was already there. She said the letters got mixed up. She said you wouldn't have been happy. She said, my mother's voice broke, she said you were so quiet, so anxious that Yale would have destroyed you. And she needed it more. She needed to get out, to be someone, and you believed her. I wanted to believe her. My mother looked up. Her eyes were wet, but not with the performative tears Lark could summon. These were real, old, exhausted. You were always so strong, Ren, so capable, you didn't need me the way she did. And when she told me, when she explained, I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe this is how it was supposed to be. Maybe you were meant to stay close, to be safe, to what? My voice was not loud. I had never been loud. But it was sharp, precise, the voice of a woman who had spent 8 years grading freshman essays and had learned to identify weakness in a single sentence. To work at a diner while my twin sister lived in my dorm, to teach composition while she discussed Donne with professors I had read about, to be safe while she was someone. Is that what I was meant for, Mom? Is that the life you chose for me when you decided her lie was easier than my truth? My mother didn't answer. She couldn't. There was no answer that would not confirm what I already knew, that she had chosen, that she had known, that she had looked at the theft of my future and had decided it was a fair trade for Lark's happiness. I left. I didn't take the cookies. I didn't take the plate. I took only the clarity, which was heavier than anything I had ever carried. I confronted Lark a week later. I drove to New York, the first time I had been there since my visit. The first time I had seen her apartment, her bookshelves, her life built from my stolen materials. I didn't call ahead. I used the key she had given me for emergencies, she had said, though she had never imagined this emergency, and I let myself in. She was home. Of course she was. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and her consulting job didn't require office hours, didn't require presence, didn't require anything except the ability to perform literary sophistication at parties. She was on the couch, reading a book I had recommended to her years ago, one she had pretended to have already read. Ren, she said, startled but recovering quickly, the way she always recovered. What are you? Why didn't you call? I wanted to surprise you, I said, the way you surprised me. 8 years ago, with the mail. She froze. For a moment, a split second, barely measurable, I saw fear in her eyes, real fear, the fear of a performer who has just realized the audience knows the trick. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice was wrong. Too high, too fast. I called Yale, I said. I have your photo, my photo. Our photo, I suppose, since it's my face and your body and my name and your crime. I know what you did, Lark. I know you took my acceptance. I know you lived my life. I know you told Mom it was for my own good, that I was too anxious, too quiet, too safe to deserve the future I had earned. Lark stood up. She put the book down. She arranged her face, the face that was also mine, the face she had worn while she stole everything, into an expression of concern, of confusion, of the wounded innocence she had perfected since childhood. Ren, you're not making sense. I went to Yale. I worked hard. I graduated. You can't accuse me of this is crazy. You're having some kind of episode. You should sit down. Let me get you water. Let me call Mom. Don't call Mom, I said. Mom already knows. Mom has known for 8 years. And Mom chose you, just like she always has. Just like everyone always has. But I'm not here for Mom. I'm here for you. I'm here to tell you that I know, that I see you, that the performance is over. Lark's face changed. The concern dropped away, the confusion evaporated, and what was left was something harder, more honest, more terrifying than anything I had seen in her before. It was contempt. Contempt for me, for my quietness, for my safety, for my willingness to accept the leftovers of a life she had taken whole. Fine, she said, you know. So what? It was 8 years ago, Ren. Ancient history, and honestly, I did you a favor. You would have hated Yale, you would have been miserable. You would have spent 4 years hiding in the library and then graduated with no friends, no connections, no idea how to actually live. I took your name and I made something of it. I built a life. I became someone. And what did you do? You stayed in Ohio. You teach freshman composition to kids who don't care. You have a cat and a car that doesn't work and a career that goes nowhere. I didn't steal your future, Ren. I saved it from you. I looked at her. I looked at my face, twisted by her contempt into something I didn't recognize. I looked at the bookshelves full of books I had read and she had performed. I looked at the life that should have been mine, decorated with her trophies, her parties, her poet boyfriend who had written sonnets to eyes he thought were mine. You really believe that? I said it wasn't a question. Of course I believe it, it's true, you were never going to use Yale, you were never going to be anyone. I am, and if you're here to try to take it back, she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, good luck. The statute of limitations expired years ago. Yale doesn't want a scandal. Mom will testify that you were unstable. And honestly, Ren, no one would believe you. You're the quiet twin, the anxious twin, the one who makes up stories because her real life is too boring. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. I didn't respond. Not because she was right, she wasn't right, she had never been right, she had simply been louder, but because I understood in that moment that confrontation was not the weapon I needed. Lark had spent her life performing. She had performed my identity for 4 years at Yale, had performed her own success in New York, had performed innocence for our mother and concern for me. She could perform her way out of any accusation, any scandal, any truth that didn't serve her narrative. What she couldn't perform her way out of was her own crime. The crime she had committed so thoroughly, so completely, that it had become indistinguishable from herself. She wasn't Lark who had stolen Ren's identity. She was Ren who had built a life. She had erased herself so completely that she had forgotten who she was without the theft. And that, I realized, was the weapon. Not exposure, not accusation, not the legal system that had expired or the family that had chosen her. The weapon was her own success, her own ambition, her own inability to stop performing me. I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 8 years in a mildewed office, grading papers, reading Donne in the dark, and who had finally found the door she had been looking for. You're right, I said, I can't take it back. What's done is done. I just wanted you to know that I see you. That the next time you introduce yourself as Ren Ashford, you'll remember that the real Ren is still here, still watching, still writing the story that you tried to steal. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I had spent enough of my life looking at her. I didn't report her. Not to Yale, not to the police, not to the professional organizations that might have cared about academic fraud. I knew what Lark knew, that the system protects the successful, that scandals fade, that a woman who can perform innocence long enough becomes innocent by default. Instead, I waited. 4 years. I finished my MFA not at the program that had discovered the discrepancy, but at another smaller, where no one knew my name or my sister's crime. I wrote. I published small essays at first, literary criticism, pieces about twinship and identity, and the way literature creates doubles who destroy each other. I built a reputation, quiet, careful, the kind of reputation that accumulates like sediment until it becomes rock. And I watched Lark. She was successful, more successful than she had been at 22. She had clients, authors, publishers, the kind of people who went to Yale and believed that other people who had gone to Yale were automatically worth trusting. She had a new boyfriend, a novelist, this time, who wrote about identity and theft and the violence of resemblance. She had applied to a PhD program at Oxford, Ren Ashford, Yale 18, thesis on Donne, the application read, because she had decided that my name, my credentials, my stolen life were not enough. She needed more. She needed Oxford. She needed to be the person I had never been, in the place I had never been, with the future I had never had. I applied too. Not to Oxford, I couldn't afford it, couldn't imagine it, had built a life that was modest and real and mine. I applied to the PhD program at the state university where I taught. Full funding. A mentor who had read my essay on twinship and had written me a note, "You should have been at Yale. But since you're here, let's build something." And then I contacted Oxford, not as an applicant, as a concerned citizen. I sent them documents, Lark's application, my application, the same name, the same social security number, the same face in different photographs. I sent them the Yale transcript, the graduation photo, the evidence of a fraud that had begun 12 years ago and had never stopped. I sent them my story, not as accusation, but as information. As context, as the kind of literary irony that a program studying English literature might appreciate. A twin who steals her sister's identity, wears it for a decade, and then tries to use it to enter the most prestigious academic institution in the world. They investigated, they found the fraud. They couldn't prosecute, the crime was American, the statute expired, the jurisdiction was complicated, but they could reject her. And they did, not quietly. Oxford's rejection letter, I later learned, included a paragraph about academic integrity and the importance of truthful representation that was pointed enough to be copied and circulated among other programs, other institutions, other people who might have considered hiring Lark Ashford, Yale 18. The fallout was slow and then fast. Lark's employer, the literary marketing firm, received an anonymous tip about her credentials. They investigated. They found that her Yale degree was real but not hers, that her thesis was real but not hers, that her entire professional identity was a performance she had never bothered to make legal. They fired her. Her clients left. Her novelist boyfriend wrote a thinly veiled story about the woman who wore another's face that was published in The New Yorker and made her unemployable in any industry that valued discretion. She tried to reclaim her name. Lark Ashford, the name she had abandoned at 18 because it was less useful than mine. But Lark Ashford had no degree, no credentials, no history except the one she had discarded. She was a ghost, haunting the edges of a life she had stolen and lost. And I wrote an essay, not about her, about us. About twins in literature, about the violence of resemblance, about the way identity is not given but constructed, word by word, choice by choice. I published it in the Paris Review, not under my name, but under hers, Lark Ashford. The byline she had used for 12 years, the name that was now synonymous with fraud, the identity that had become a prison of her own making. The essay went viral. It was discussed in academic circles, in literary forums, in the kind of publications that Lark had once frequented as Wren. People speculated about the author. Was it the same Lark Ashford who had been exposed? Was it a pseudonym? Was it performance art, a final twist in a story about identity and theft? Lark tried to claim it. Of course she did. She called the Paris Review, called literary agents, called anyone who would listen, and insisted that she was the author, that the essay was hers, that she was Lark Ashford and therefore entitled to the byline and the attention and the career resurrection that the essay's success might provide. No one believed her. Because the essay was about her crime. Because it was written with the precision of someone who had lived the theft rather than committed it. Because it ended with a line that only the real Wren could have written. The twin who steals your face does not become you. She becomes a prisoner of the mask, while you, finally free, learn to build a voice that no one can borrow. She called me once. After the essay, after the book deal, after the stolen history was announced, and her name appeared in the subtitle, as the subject rather than the author, she was crying real tears, not performative, the tears of a woman who had finally understood that her performance had become her prison. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't know it mattered so much. I didn't know you would. I thought you were safe. I thought you were happy. You thought I didn't want anything," I said. "You thought I was content to be quiet, to be anxious, to be the twin who stayed home while you went where words mattered. You thought my lack of performance meant lack of desire. You were wrong. I wanted everything. I just wanted it quietly. And you wanted it so loudly that you couldn't hear me wanting it too. I can give it back," she whispered. "The name. The degree. I can tell people. I can explain. You can't give it back," I said. "You can't return a life. You can't unsteal a future. All you can do is live with what you've built." And what I've built, I looked at my desk. At the manuscript of the stolen history, at the photo of my cat Donne sleeping on a stack of student papers. What I've built is mine. Not borrowed, not performed. Just mine. I hung up. She didn't call again. I'm Wren. I'm 32 years old. I'm sitting in my office, a real office now, with a window and a door that closes and no mildew when a student stays after class. 19. A twin. Her sister, she tells me, the pretty one, has just applied to the same university she did. Using her personal essay. She asked to borrow it, the student says, for inspiration. She said she just wanted to see my writing style. I show her my book, The Stolen History. I show her the dedication for Lark, who taught me that identity is not what you're given, but what you take back. Your sister didn't borrow your essay, I say, she stole it. And you have two choices: believe that you don't want it enough, or claim what is yours. I chose the second. Late, but not too late. The student looks at the book. She looks at me, at my face, which is also her face, which is also the face of every twin who has ever been told that one of them must be the shadow so the other can be the light. How? She asks. I smile. It's not a warm smile. It's the smile of a woman who has learned that warmth is something you earn through fire, not something you're given because you're quiet. First, I say, you write your own essay, the real one, the one only you can write. And then I hand her a card, my name, my real name, the one that no one can borrow because I have finally made it too heavy with meaning to lift. You publish it, under your name, with your face, with your life. And you let the world decide which twin deserves to be remembered. She takes the card. She doesn't thank me, not yet. She just stands and walks out. And I watch her go and I think, she may not make it, they don't all make it. Some sisters are too loud, too practiced, too skilled at taking what doesn't belong to them. But some do. I did. And everyone who does is a story written in a voice that cannot be borrowed, a face that cannot be worn, a self that is finally, completely, irrevocably her own. If you're listening to this and someone stole your face, your name, your work, your future, your quiet desire, I want you to know, the theft is not the ending, the performance is not the truth. And the twin who learns to write in her own voice, to publish under her own name, to build a life that cannot be borrowed is not the shadow. She is the story. She is the author. She is the one who decides which version gets told. See you in the next story.